Hello. Hi, welcome along. Today I have my dear friend Nova, and hi, I'm Jon Binnie. We're going to be discussing in our Shadow Work podcast the important topic of boundaries. And this was requested by one of you, so thank you so much for your requests. And please do put your requests in the comments. We love hearing about requests for shadow work topics. And to practice what we hopefully not too preachy preach is we'd like to start by setting up a safe space. And what I'll do is in this video is if you're not really into this sort of thing, that's absolutely fine. It just takes 2 or 3 minutes to do, and you can skip forwards. But I personally would recommend that you at least listen along and see if this resonates with you. It's all about creating a strong energetic boundary around yourself. So with that, we'll get started. And then after a few minutes, we'll get straight into our discussion about boundaries. So if you'd like to join me now, we'll begin by taking 3 deep breaths in through the nose, nice and deep. Hold and breathe out through the mouth what no longer serves our highest good, nice and loud. Breathe in through the nose, nice and deep. And breathe out any fear, shame, lack, pain, anxiety, or stress, nice and loud. And breathe in through the nose, nice and deep. And breathe out any remaining low vibration energy. And continue to breathe deeply and calmly. And from the center of your heart, I'd like you to imagine a golden spark of light. And in that light, in the center of your heart, extend a light cord up through the top of your head, up through the roof of the building that you're in, all the way up into the sky, up through into the stars, through the universe, going higher and higher until you reach the highest dimension of the source of love of this universe, or whatever you believe to be at that highest frequency. There, connecting your light cord into source. Remain connected and extend your light cord down to the stars and to the sky, back down to the top of your head and into your heart once more. And now from the center of your heart, this time extend your light cord down through the base of your spine, down into the ground, going deeper and deeper all the way through the layers of the planet until you reach the very core of the planet, the soul of the planet, Mother Gaia. And they are connecting in the core into Mother Gaia's crystalline heart. And send so much love and gratitude to our planet, our Mother Earth. Remain connected to Gaia's heart and extend our light cords up all the way through the layers of the planet, up through the surface, up through the root of our spine and into our hearts once more. And now together with the light and love of Source above and Mother Gaia below, together with your own light and love, expand it out. Imagine a golden bubble growing from the center of your heart all the way out to expand about 2 meters out from the center of your heart. 2 meters out either side, above, below, in front and behind. And for this golden bubble, this is our sacred boundary around each of us individually. And we set the intention for our individual boundaries that only energies and entities with our permission, our highest good, love and compassion can see us, access us, or exists within this space or within us. And that all other energies and entities must leave us immediately. And into these safe spaces, each of us get to choose who and what we invite in, physical or metaphysical. And you can choose with me to invite in your guides, your highest self. I also invite in archangels, Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael, Source and Gaia, all of which we ask for our guidance, our clearing, our healing, our protection, our self-love, and assistance with our intuition. And we set the intention that all other energies and entities must leave our spaces immediately. And then finally, for this podcast today, I also create a golden bubble around all of us that are watching, and for both Nova and I in the recording. And I set the intention that only energies and entities with our permission, our highest good, love and compassion can see us, access us, or exist within this space or within us. All other energies and entities must leave us immediately. Okay. And that's us. That's us set up a safe space. It was really funny. I put my hands up. Oh, it's done it again. And in Zoom, it's like flipping my camera view around. I don't know if it's the same for you, Nova.
That's interesting. Let me try.
If I do this
No,
again.
I don't know why
And then there.
Yeah, mine doesn't show up.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
Fabulous. So where do we start with boundaries? Should we start with some of the definition? Like maybe you'd like to start, Nova, describing what you feel boundaries are to you.
Do you mean like an energetic boundary or like relationships or
It's all of the above.
all the above?
Yeah.
A boundary is something that you put in place to keep your peace. I think there's a lot of shadows around boundaries because sometimes people feel that they're being mean by putting up a boundary, or they gaslight themselves, or it's just so foreign to them to have a boundary or to protect themselves or to have these guidelines. And in a way, we have to give ourselves the compassion to put up a boundary and to realize it's a part of self-care. It's about preserving our energy. And when we have boundaries and we commit to them and we stick to them, other people, should, be respectful of that, obviously. And it's good for your self-love. It's good for your self-esteem. And it really makes you feel um more compassionate to yourself, that you're taking the time to realize, what is important for yourself and what is the um it's something that you kind of have to think about sometimes with boundaries, because when there's shadows involved and we don't want to put those boundaries up, we have to explore um the consequences of not having a boundary. We have to explore what it's like, to have a boundary. And I think any person who has boundaries would find that it it makes them, it's almost like when you give yourself a boundary, you're giving yourself like permission to love yourself more when you do that.
Yeah.
That's the best thing I could say.
Wow. That's some just fantastic answers in there. I wish I'd known this years ago. um yeah, I to answer the question what boundaries are for me, they've definitely evolved over the last few years. And as I've still spent like the good like first 40 years of my life not really understanding what boundaries are. um I'm I'm pretty confident if you asked me back in 2016 what boundaries were, I probably would have given quite a kind of flexible, meandering type answer. So I would have, back then I would do things like if I was when I was super career driven in my software engineering job, and my like managing director said, could I need you to work the weekend, and even though I had plans, I would be like, well, I kind of like need it for my career. And then but I feel bad about my family. And then it would be about my ego, it'd be in there as well. And there'd be no real like firm, you talked about self-love, like no firm self-love boundary. Like, would I be exhausted or not? It's just, I would tend to often go with the thing that maybe either the person or the thing that shouted loudest, whether it was someone asking me to, like shouting at me to do it, or part of me, like my ego going, but if you do this, maybe John will like get promoted or something. It's like I would just go with that. And that made me, um, if I think back, uh, for the 10 years prior to that, I went through a gradual erosion of boundaries. So I gave up music, which I was doing every weekend. I gave up and anything beyond anything physical exercise, anything beyond my daily run or Monday to Friday. And I ended up with very few friends and very little hobbies, just work and family, which is still, lots compared to many people on the planet. But that gradual erosion of my boundaries massively eroded my self-love. And I felt so lost. I felt like very vulnerable as well. And I did end up working at a job for a short period of time where my boundaries were so eroded already when I went into that place. It was just a disaster for me. But it was like the universe is like, if you think, it's like, if you think, John, you have like no boundaries, let's see what happens when we put you in the kind of the into the snake pit. And yeah, that was really horrible. And so now, yeah, I totally agree with your a lot of your definitions. I feel like for now, my understanding of boundaries are both physically and energetically, they are my dominion of the universe. So everyone has free will in the universe. And that means that you all get to decide, everyone gets to decide what we do. Because otherwise, if the universe wasn't modeled like that, and the model was more, one being telling every other being in the universe, it's a huge orchestration job to do, right? But it's like that would be a very different approach to a universe. Whereas ours, I believe, is free will. And in my execution of my free will, I get to choose within about, and this is another topic of discussion, but for about 2 meters around me, wherever I go, I get to decide in this kind of protective bubble, like I set up at the beginning. That is a spatial boundary for me, and I get to decide what energy comes into it, what I watch on TV, what I look at on my phone, who I talk to, who physically can stand or sit or hold me, hug me within that space. Um, the and metaphysically, energies that I allow into my space, either because I explicitly invite them in, they wander in, or I kind of implicitly do. Like I'm maybe not entirely sure, but they drift in anyway. Um, and I get to decide. And the really interesting thing about boundaries is that if, as to your point of self-love, if you truly love yourself, when you like a true act of self-love is that self-care of setting a boundary, that when something or someone pushes against that boundary or tries to break it, it it has to be this kind of do or die type mentality. Like you have to
Yeah.
say, no, my boundaries are strong. They're like castle walls. And so if you want to come through them, like I will fight, I will fight you to ensure you do not come through these boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very easy. Many of us are very empathic, right? And so
Um,
it's very easy a lot of the time when someone says, go on, just like stand on one leg for 3 hours just to make me laugh. And you're like, no, a boundary of me is that, I would not do something just to make you laugh for 3 hours. And if they pushed you again, you'd say, no, absolutely not. It's just not what I do. And they're like, oh, like, why are you being, they're pushing against the boundary. And it's quite shocking for people
yeah.
when they're just used to you going, oh, I'll just go and hug a tree for a while and being so happy and outgoing all the, sorry, happy and high vibe all the time, that when someone rubs against a boundary, it can be really shocking for people because the energy is such a switch. And yet I don't feel, even now, I don't feel super obliged to explain my boundaries explicitly to everyone. Like, hi, I'm Jon Binnie. Here's my 10 rules. Engaging with me means these 10 things. It's just like, no, I'll tell you when you get close or when you hit or breach a boundary, you'll know. Um, so yeah, I think they're hugely powerful, and I love the theme of self-love. Like if you want to truly look after yourself, then have strong boundaries.
Yeah. I agree. One thing that I was noticing is that in society, we're kind of not taught to have boundaries. Like even as children, I've been learning a little bit about the inner child and about how children are raised, and I've noticed that even as children, we were forced to like go hug a relative if we didn't want to. And I remember in elementary school in PE class, we were forced to exercise even if we didn't want to, and if we didn't, we get in trouble. So it's all these little like these little ways that we kind of get programmed into not honoring our boundaries, and especially with pressure from school, and it's always get work done and always do things. But I know a lot of people, especially in my first year of high school in an accelerated program, everyone was stressed out. And then the counselors would tell us we were bad at time management. But the reality is like we were just given too much homework. And and some people have bands, some people have athletics, some people like they have to eat out with their family, some people have early morning tutoring and after school tutoring. It's just insane. And it's like we're trying to tell you guys, like as children, like, hey, I don't want to do something, but then the authorities are like, well, no, you have to, or you get in trouble. And people like it's a very heart-centered thing, and our society is kind of gone away from emotions big time, and it's incredibly sad. And I've actually been getting like little flashbacks and like dreams of like times where boundaries were crossed over me, at a young age. And I would have these memories, these dreams, and I would like feel into the emotion of what it felt like, and I just see the connection so much. And it's very scary, because we're really hypersensitive. It's like we're sensitive to a person's anger, we're sensitive to, a person, judging us. And the reality is that we need our emotions and our feelings to be valid, and to someone to tell us, hey, they're valid, and hey, it's what you need to do. And it's useful and it's helpful and it's how you show your love. But we don't get any of that oftentimes. And even the adults too don't even recognize it. And it's interesting because if the adults knew about boundaries, they could teach their kids about boundaries and how to be safe. And if a boundary gets crossed and you get hurt, you can go to someone who will, help you, and you don't have to feel like ashamed or bad. It's just,
Mhm.
it's the experience of life, and there's just natural consequences to our actions, and it's just part of how we learn. Um,
Yeah.
and the work in like a lot of work environments, especially, a lot of us, well, especially people my age, were taught, just do what you're told and be disciplined and be obedient, and you'll get rewarded. But then it turns out you end up getting overworked and you don't get valued. And then because you don't value yourself or your self-love, when they see that they can step on your boundaries, then they know they can get away with it. And oftentimes, or sometimes, some people don't even realize they're stepping over a boundary because you don't say anything.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
right.
not everyone, yeah. So not everyone who's like crossing a boundary is aware they're doing it. And when people aren't voicing how they feel, like I said before, if you don't express how you feel, you end up getting angry, right? And so sometimes a person who's not speaking up for themselves will be angry at a person who's crossing their boundary, but that person doesn't know they're crossing a boundary because they didn't say anything. And then they're like, why are you mad at me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it, there's a lot, regarding boundaries. And the more that we take that step to say no, and to say, I want to live my life this way, I want to make my decisions this way. And it's also partial of not caring what other people think. But when you're more secure in your heart and you validate your feelings, well, you're giving yourself that compassion that other people aren't going to understand, they're not going to get. And they're especially not going to get it if you're too afraid to say how you feel. And partially why you're even afraid of to say how you feel is because you kind of know, or you at least been programmed that, this feeling that you have is somehow not valid,
Hmm.
or this person you can't talk to because then they're going to, gaslight you, or they're going to be dismissive, or some kind of thing. People who are more emotionally, mature, and people who are more empathic will honestly truly really try to make sure that they're treating other people well,
Yeah.
without being provoked into something happens or not. They'll naturally care about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. You remind me of like a work boundaries. I my 8 years of my last corporate company, a global company. So based in, my work was based in Edinburgh in Scotland, and the time zone that I worked with was 8 hours behind. And so over on the west coast of the US. And so what would happen is we used to work about typically about 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. That was a kind of like meant to be the hours that would work. And often I'd be invited to meetings pretty much all the way through to about midnight UK time or Scotland time. And I learned quickly that would, like, very quickly. I remember within the first few days, like that, like if I wasn't sure about a boundary, there's no way physically I could just go and attend all these meetings. And I remember asking my boss about it, and he just said, well, I just keep those in my calendar so that I can just decide, maybe after dinner, I might dial into some of these or not. Sometimes I'll listen in or not. And he just considered that after, 6 or 7 p.m., that he would just dial in sometimes. But then he would say sometimes, well, why weren't you there? It's like, well, and so eventually I just said, look, my boundary is 7 p.m. And later, after a few years, it became 6 p.m. And it was really fascinating because boundaries are not bad, right? Boundaries are good. In fact, they're really, really good. Insert passionate swear words. Because the reason they're so good is because they make us more productive, more happy and healthy and sustainable. And so what I quickly realized was the first thing I started learning was when someone in West Coast US would say, hey, John, can you like do this report for like, you know, 8 p.m. your time, UK time? I'd say no. I'd say I'll work on it till 6 and hand it over to you to review what I've done. And then I'd say first thing in the morning while you're sleeping, I'll have almost an entire working day. And I said, because I'm rested, I'll be like, I can go and brainstorm with the team. I can innovate like that. I can come up with new ideas, new ways of doing this, not just like our last minute, response to a customer or a senior leader. That we'd actually come up with something, inventive. And you can do that if you work to midnight that night. It's this total kind of false economy of your own sustainability and your own self love. And the vast majority, I'd say like 90% of the time, it worked because people would go, well, okay, it doesn't really make any difference to me. And they'd totally forget the time zone difference. But it was so on one hand, the time zone was pushing me to try and work later. But the other hand, it's like, well, if I can just have a clear boundary, you work with me and my team, we finish at 6 p.m., which is, what was that, 10 a.m. West Coast in the US. Like that's how long you have us. And we will create better work than any other team, and we'll be the happiest high performing team you've seen. And of course you still have to do all those things, but that was a big game changer for me. And yet earlier in my career for many years, I'd allowed that to erode because of many things you mentioned, like, oh well, maybe I get promoted, maybe the person, maybe my boss would be happier, my customer would be happier. All that I saw whenever I did it was that people around me got more and more unhappy with the work I created during those time periods, because over time eventually they'd say like, John, you're burning out, or like, how come you're just so stressed all the time? It's like, because you're making me do all this work. And
Yeah.
you realize, oh, actually it's me, I'm the one that's making myself do this work. No one's going to create my boundaries for me.
Yeah, it's bizarre. The idea of being an adult is like responsibility, and you're just kind of like expected to know something, heart-based, that you're not really going to be taught anywhere until you deal with the consequences of not, taking care of yourself, of not having boundaries, of not practicing your self-love. Excuse me. And it's incredible to me because a lot of people, in the self-help you know, they start to learn about boundaries, they start to learn about love, they start to learn about these things. And it's like, why are we learning these things like in our 20s and 30s? We should have learned this like a long time ago, you know. And it feels like, you know, we get conditioned, we get programmed to live life a certain way, and then that's supposed to be it, like you're an adult now. And I remember feeling like, no, I'm 18 but I'm not an adult. Like I have so many things about myself that I need to learn and fix. It's just I didn't get the support, and it's like, well, now you're supposed to get the support. And it's incredible because things just pile on, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard to like break out of the fear, you know. And that was something I've experienced a lot, is the fear of like having too much to do and not having anyone who listens to me, and that when I would speak up or I would say something, it really wouldn't really work. It'd be dismissed. And especially in my time in a religious cult, there was you know, they have boundaries in religion, right? But the boundaries were kind of more like, well, if you don't do certain things, or if you do certain things, you'll either get like punished or rewarded, or, you know, you would commit sin, or things like that. And there's also a toxic positivity, you know, to service, right?
Mhm.
Where people are giving too much service, people are committed but they're being overly committed. There's sacrifice and not compromise, you know. And so sacrifice sometimes gets this praise when it's really like, well, what about boundaries, you know, what about compromise, you know. And it's instead, it's like, look at that person, because they're sacrificing so much, you know, to be here or whatever. That's one of the things that I noticed, you know, in my time in religion, is that people would kind of get these religious callings that pretty much the bishop assigned people stuff. And so they would say, well, you are, you know, seminary teacher, you know, or you are to teach the primary in school and stuff. And because of the obedience thing and like the religious part of it, it's supposed to be something that you like, you can say no, but there's kind of this pressure to say yes, you know. We call it like voluntold
Yeah.
instead of volunteered.
Mhm.
um and one of the things I would hear very often is that when we would, you know, appreciate people for their services in the church, one of the first things mentioned would be is the sacrifice. They sacrifice to be here. They sacrifice to teach, you know, the seminary students, or they sacrifice to be the bishop, or they you know, it's all this idea of sacrifice. and and that's supposed to be something we're supposed to appreciate. But it's like, at the same time, it's like, I would feel happier if the person who volunteered and wasn't voluntold, and who had boundaries and who had help, you know, could actually, you know, just be happy, instead of just like, oh, you're just supposed to get praise because everyone's just happy that you sacrifice. I'm like, are you happy? You know, like, are you happy with your sacrifice? Are you feeling supported? Are you having your batteries, you know, recharged? You know, and things like that. And it's kind of bizarre to me, because I feel that if people aren't willing, you know, to help each other out in the first place, or if people aren't willing to support each other in the first place, it has to be like one person with a religious job and like maybe two counselors or whatever. It's like, why do we have to be told, you know, to help another person, you know? Or why, like, can we just ask a person like, hey, how are you actually doing, or how are you actually feeling? And it's something we don't really think about sometimes. And oftentimes it's because we're dealing with our own stress of our own lack of boundaries, that we don't even think about other people, you know, and how they're
Mhm.
feeling and how they're doing. um and of course, another thing was the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, you know. And that was seen as a sacrifice. You know, there's a certain attitude, there's a certain kind of feeling that it's supposed to make you feel, that somehow sacrifice was like this, like your job wasn't seminary teacher or bishop, your job was to sacrifice. And
Yeah.
depending on how much more you sacrificed, it was seen as more praiseworthy, or it was seen as more noble, or it was
Yeah.
seen as selfless. Um,
Like the ultimate
and
sacrifice to die for other people's sins. You know,
yeah, exactly.
look what an achievement that is.
Yeah. And it almost creates like this hierarchy,
Hmm.
in a way, because it seems like the more important job you have, the more you have to sacrifice. And and that's just another way, I was like conditioned to think of sacrifice as this praiseworthy good things, but it's really like a lack of boundaries. And
Yeah.
if we're going to talk about sacrifice, in some cases, yeah, there is some sacrifice, but what about the overall happiness and well-being of a person? Because if you
Yeah.
really are happy, you wouldn't feel like you're sacrificing.
Yeah.
You would feel like you love what you're doing. You would feel like you respect yourself. Other people respect your time. Other people respect your boundaries, and and things like that. And it's been kind of sad for me, honestly, because I've seen, either seminary teachers or Sunday school teachers, and it's really hard to teach, uh, you know, and not everyone is like good at it, or it's kind of hard to get the participation of younger students and stuff. And so I'm always there, like raising my hand, like answering questions. And because it's just kind of awkward when it's like you're a teacher and there's a room of like 20 teenagers and no one is saying anything, and it's super eerie when that happens, and that
Yeah.
happens often. And and I, in some cases, I've been a teacher or had a teaching role, and I have empathy, because I understand what it's like, to have a job and you're sacrificing, or you're kind of volunteering, or at least in a religious setting, and like no one is showing you that they appreciate you. It may not be that, but I've definitely seen um people who were having these religious jobs, and they're obviously stressed out,
Yeah.
and they're obviously putting a lot of pressure on themselves, and they're kind of worried about like perfection. They're worried about making sure, like if it's a group or a team thing, like if it's like a religious camp, it's like there's so much organization, there's so much planning, you have to deal with so many things. And and I just remember being the one who's being like served, or who's participating as a youth, and with all these leaders, and they're volunteering, and I do notice it, and I do feel it. And it honestly, it feels quite unfair, you
Yeah.
know um but I noticed it's a certain vibration, and a certain level of self-love for yourself. You have to take care of yourself first before you help others. And sometimes I wonder, because it's easy to say, oh, those people don't help, they're selfish, they're lazy. And it's like, well, maybe, they don't have the stress relief of emotional closeness. Maybe they have their shame, maybe they have their shadows, and maybe that's why, they choose not to help. Or it's not that or sometimes they don't even know if people need help,
Yeah.
so
Or they don't have their own boundaries. So why would they even know like
yeah,
how to pay attention to yours?
exactly. And I remember one time in particular, I was not feeling very good in church, and I didn't want to be around people, so I think I skipped either Sunday school or another thing for the young women. And we kind of have our own like little categories or whatever. So there's Sunday school, where it's boys and girls, and it's for the youth. And then we have young women's, which is just like Sunday school in a way, like for the women of a certain age group. And I didn't want to go. And I was just in church, and everyone else was in their classes, and I was just sitting on the couch. And one of the older adults, who kind of has this leadership position, to like as a to like watch over or to guide the young women in Christian values and things like that. We're young, so like we obviously need adults, so they kind of have a role there.
Mhm.
And she was in the hallway, and she approached me, and I can't really say exactly how the conversation went, but I think I mentioned how I didn't want to go. And then she kind of gave me this attitude, and she was like, well, sister so and so, put a lot of time and a lot of effort to make this, lesson to teach you guys. And and something like, it would be ashamed if you didn't go or whatever. And I said I didn't want to go. And she was like, oh, sorry to hear that. But she gave this attitude to me. And I'm just like, you're upset because I'm not in school in religious class, but like, why are you doing in the hall? Like, why aren't you in class? Like,
Yeah.
you're getting after me, And but I would sometimes get this chastising like from other adults or from authority figures that you're being selfish,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're not appreciating people. And it's like, well, no, it's just I have a boundary and this is how I feel. And like, yes, I would love to support people, and on any other day I would, but there's just things going on that it, I can't express or I can't say or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's this judgment on people who have boundaries. Oh, you're so mean. People who don't have boundaries, like, what's wrong with you being an
Yeah, they're
adult?
great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or people who don't know boundaries are being overcrossed, and then they like, oh, I secretly hate you, but I'm not going to tell you why.
Yeah,
It's
that's
strange.
so true. One thing you reminded me of in the workplace is uh about 6 years of the 8 years of my last corporate job. When I joined in 2016, I remember quite just a few months in, we as like a management team, there's about I think it's about 20 of us in the office got together and we're reviewing everyone's performance for the year, which is really common across many companies. And quite quickly, one of the managers said, "Oh, person A is working too hard." And I was like, what does that mean? What does working too hard mean? And they said, well, like they're working extra hours, they're worried, they don't really understand their customer products, their technical domain, and they're trying to compensate by too many hours. And so they're really stressed out all the time and they're just working so hard and they need help, like they need support, some mentorship. They need to deep dive into the things that they're kind of skipping over that's causing them a lot of their anxiety, and they need to have boundaries. And I was just like, this is new to me as a manager. It's like, I think I feel those things for myself, but I've never really heard a management team. And everyone's like, yeah, it's true. Don't work too hard. And it kept coming up like year after year. And I found myself, I'd say as well, it's like, it's got to, whatever we do, our teams are happy, sustainable, healthy, productive. It was, it to me, a happy team is a team that smiles a lot and enjoys their work and are kind of many things we're not really taught at school or programmed through our society to do is like, oh, they're always seeking like this kind of moment of flow, that kind of mad genius part where you're just like, you can't stop what you're doing, you're loving so much, like it's so much fun. And you're creating constantly and you're working together as a team and everyone feels like they're not part of just a gear in a machine. They're part of like crazily beautifully inventive minds that are helping solve problems that no one's ever even thought of before. And that really excited me when I got started to shift my mindset towards that. And if I was as you were speaking, I was trying to think of like, what are the boundaries right now that I have, like my non-negotiables. um if I start with the physical, it is like, well, regular exercise. Like I'm a morning person, get up, do a morning run. Like it's non-negotiable thereabouts, unless I'm like going on a plane or I don't know, we were traveling overnight or something. So for example, Friday morning, I went for a run at a campsite. We're camping for 3 days and went running with my son. And it was, even though it was a shorter run because he's not as used to running, it was just a lovely bonding moment. It's like that for me is not negotiable. I meditate uh, every day, and even if that means waking up like I did this morning at 6 a.m., alarm goes off, sit up, meditate for 10 minutes, go back to sleep. It's like it it still just for me it just has to happen. So if someone tells me that they think that I should not do that, it's like, you don't get to decide what I do with those 10 minutes of my sleep window. That's just like, that's a boundary for me. Um, and then other things I found really surprising when I left my corporate job in May, and I see this as more of a like kind of societal programming, was I remember a customer saying something to me. They were like, "Oh, John, you need to come and do like an energy healing at this date and time." And I was like, "Oh yeah, right." They're saying blah blah, and I was thinking, "Hang on, like," I was like, do I need to do what they're telling me to do? Who's my boss? And I remember asking myself, who's my boss? He was, oh yeah, I'm my own boss. And there's like my brain kind of exploded. It was like, whoa, I get to decide. I get to decide how much. I truly believe in obsessing about my customers and putting them first and being right. But even my customers, they have to have boundaries with me. And I said, no, these are the things that here's my boundaries. So you get these slots, you get like these two things, and that's it. And it was such a breath of fresh air. And I like to your points, you're saying over about, when someone starts the kind of the boundary creeping, they're like, these little spiders like crawling around the outside of your castle walls, and you can feel the tingles, and they feel horrible, right? Because they're like, why does that feel weird? What are you doing? And they're saying things like, well, I see you have a little bit of a boundary there, and I'm going to use whatever manipulation I can to like erode it because it's annoying for me. Your boundaries are very inconvenient. Um, and you're thinking, no, this is it. Like it starts to feel weird. It starts to, even though they're like smiling and I'm gonna, look at all this, look how great it would be if you just did this one thing. And like I was talking about the 6 p.m. Finish of the working day earlier, it's like just 6:15, just 6:30, and on it goes until you're like there to like 4 a.m. and you're like, oh, I can't keep going like this. And then some of my other boundaries, and these are like energetically, is I just like I did at the beginning, I did not give permission for others to give me, how to describe it, unsolicited energy healing or readings. Like the more sensitive I become, the more jarring it is for me. It's like literally, it happened to me earlier today, and I sat in my chair building some training material in my home office, and it's literally like someone came and shook my chair. Like my head was ringing, it's like pulsing, and I'm like, it's like, who is that? And I was like, I don't care who you are. Like, you better back off because that is in my boundary. And I'm not aware of giving any permission. I just pushed it right out, and it just settled right down, pushed it outside of my boundaries. Like, I don't know what you are, who you are, not interested. And that was also a huge learning for me, both as a receiver, but also as a practitioner. Like I would never break that golden rule.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I have a shadow work oracle that I want to show you, because there's a shadow card here called boundaries. And I remember doing readings for people, and I don't really like have a business or anything. I'm just more selective, but I felt like it would be a good idea to read what it says about boundaries here. And so this is called Wisdom of the Shadow. It's one of my
Mm.
favorite ones. Yeah. Um, and it actually comes up quite often. And like, as I was thinking about it, I was like, I know what this card looks like because I've seen it before, and this is the card of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So like looking at the picture, it says, I mean, it has some profanity, but
Yeah, a little bit. It's pretty clear.
yeah, it basically says like, get away from me, and
Yeah.
this is the picture of a person like meditating, and maybe like an aura and like
Mm-hmm.
a mouth. It's like screaming
Screaming
for
heart.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes, and boundaries, when we don't have boundaries, it's like we're consuming something that we didn't consent to in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like we use like our mouth to decide, what we're going to consume, what we're going to deal with, but we also use like our mouth to voice, hey, I don't want to do this, this is a boundary of mine, right? So, and I did not remember that it had that there, so I hope YouTube doesn't get mad at us for, but yes, let me go find it. So yeah, it says here boundaries. So let me fold the card as I read it. It says here, boundaries are vital. Our time, our energy, our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our resources, our wisdom are all quite precious. We get to choose what we have the capacity to hold, and what we desire to share, and how we engage with others, and what we say yes or no to. We do not need to burn ourselves out, sacrifice ourselves, or extend ourselves in any way to make others comfortable. We do not owe an explanation to anyone for how we choose to live or share ourselves. We are allowed to set boundaries to preserve what we desire, before the point of burnout or dissonance. If someone becomes uncomfortable because of the boundaries we put up, that is not ours to hold or manage. That's even more reason to set boundaries. We want to ensure that we are boundaried without putting up walls that prevent ourselves from being mutually beneficial, for being in mutually beneficial exchanges with others. We also want to ensure that we aren't shutting down or off to avoid having tough conversations. Setting healthy boundaries is a form of self-care. Embrace your power to protect what is sacred. Notice any internal discomfort when saying yes to something. If you have a hard time telling people no, ask yourself why. Consider any tendencies to overgive. Notice if you feel drained due to imbalanced boundaries. And it has some 3 questions for you to think about. Where do I desire to be fiercer in my declaration of my needs? Where am I overprotecting myself in imbalanced ways? How can I speak up and create clear boundaries?
Yay. So cool. Um, yeah, I agree with I think everything there. I was also reminded that words have magic, right? And so if I give an example, a customer orders an energy healing from me, and I do one for an hour with them, fantastic, and I send them a follow up, and then I always say like 3 days later. So I say for the 3 days afterwards, please let me know how you're doing. I literally love hearing like was it a pleasant integration experience? Did they have any challenges? Did anything weird happen? Anything wonderful? Um, and sometimes people will say, "Oh, could you?" Because I offer it. I say, in those 3 days, if something happens, I will do a check-in for you, and that means maybe, and I'll say it right. I'll say like a 10 or 20 minute. I would check in energetically if you gave me permission to look at something specific. Um, and often the communication is written, right, and I will say, for example, I always watch my words, because I don't want to say, and now for the rest of your life you have complete free permission to ask me anything forever for free. And when I say for free, I mean first of all energetically, and then secondly financially. Um, and and so instead, I'll say, yeah, I will happily do like a 10-minute check-in. And then if you want to buy you can either use my free meditations. So that's another boundary. That stuff there is free. You can do what you want with that. And then if you want to actually have my time and energy, you have to pay for like another session. And here's the offerings, or the one I would choose. I found that so hard for years. And as a result, I attracted lots of energy vampires, and I became very burnt out very fast. And I totally underestimated the energetic cost of a lot of energy healing work. Like it would
Oh, yeah.
drain my cup. And so I'd just be running on empty a lot of the time. Um, and yeah, I love a lot of the card, describing, the strong boundaries, and saying like, who cares if they say, oh, John charges too much? It's like, well, there are literally millions of us in this planet that can do all these different things. So you do not need to like my boundaries or not. They just are. And giving myself permission to be able to draw that boundary and say, right, these are the rules of engagement. If you work with John, it's just really simple. And um and I also started to realize that the words are really important. Like, I can't just leave something open ended
Yeah.
to even simple things like, if I have a discount for a training course, I learned quite quickly, well, that can only run for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you'd literally have people coming back to you years later going, hey, that thing you said, and you feel, well, I do want to, keep my promises. But if your promises are open ended, like, are you going to keep it for the rest of your life, or your soul's existence? Um, and finally, I also wanted to just reflect on um, the one of the really one of the hardest aspects I find about boundaries is that in relationships, friendships, in intimate relationships, partnerships, any kind of relationship, they're really hard because when you set down a boundary and you say, hi, I'm John, I'd love to be in a relationship, but for instance, like you can't just turn up at my house. You have to, you have to ask, and we have to book in time. If that doesn't work for you, like that's no good. And then but you really like or love the person, and they're like, that's I'm just not like that, and you're left with this really hard decision, like, girl, what do I do? Like, I've got this boundary which is non-negotiable for me, and then I've got this thing which is a really powerful relationship. And I feel like the simple answer is there's no right answer, right? Like you have to decide what your boundaries are. And on the journey of things like relationships, helping understand the why behind boundaries can help you get really fine grained on it. And maybe, the other person just cares that it is just a warning sign for them that you're not really committed. And actually, it's
Mhm.
nothing to do with the boundary itself. Or maybe there's a practical aspect that, they run by your house twice a day and that they would love to just pop in sometimes. And you just say, it's fine, just text me a minimum of 15 minutes before you turn up at the door, and I get the chance to say no. And things like that can make a huge difference to people getting really fine grained on your boundaries. And as your card was saying, like that, that feeling you get when you're that ick you get when it's like, I think I just broke one of my boundaries. Like, it should feel horrible, right? It should, because you put those boundaries there for a reason, to help display an act of self-love for yourself, and also to execute your free will in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I call it dread. It's like you're dreading that you have to do something that you didn't want to, or that you promised, and but it's not actually for you. And it's like it weighs on your mind, that sometime, this coming Monday or Tuesday, I have to do this thing that I agree to, or it's just something like that. It's crazy. I call it dread.
Mhm. I think it is a great red flag, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I was going to talk about energetically is, and we haven't been super metaphysical in this chat today, but um, I was asked by a friend about the why a boundary of 2 meters, that I create energetically, like this golden bubble. And like there's not a right answer, right? I love the card. Like, if you look at the card that you showed, it was quite a close boundary. Um, and I did a little bit of research online, and it's like, yeah, somewhere between 1 meter and 2 meters is where your etheric field of your energetic bodily energy resonating from you exists out to. 2 meters is really quite far. Like, in the room I'm in, it's 2 meters above my heart would go just up and it touch the roof, and then it would go into the ground, and then just outside of my studio walls. Um, and the reason I create 2 meters is because I've experienced in my work, especially in like negative entity clearing, or when I'm doing like exorcism work, where it's like sustained sessions with people to remove something that's attacking them, or from them or from their home. It is um it's more common for me to have what I describe as, when we're talking about spiders going around the outside of a castle wall. It's a bit like that, but like quite dark entities, often behind, not always, but often behind me. And when I create that boundary each day, they'd be pushing, just each day, just gradually pushing and shrinking or warping the shape of your boundary. And it's both metaphysical and physical, metaphorically, like symbolic. It's all symbolic, right? Which is that it's like that gradual, you can almost ignore it. You're just like, oh, it's okay, my blinkers are gradually slowing each day, closing each day, until eventually I can really can't see much. And now, when I feel something pushing at any time against a boundary, I get really, like that card, like I get quite fierce. I'm like, this is no, this is mine. Like, you don't get to choose, whoever you are, whatever you are. um and it'll make me go back, and I'll go back to that moment, that feeling. And it's never like everything for a reason. So it's never just some disembodied, wandering negative entity just happens to, come across me. It's like something's pushing on my boundary for a reason, and feeling into the why, like what was going on in my mind at that time, what inner self, doubt or self talk was I giving myself? Who or what was I thinking of? And being having like a heightened awareness is very helpful. I would say there's also some downsides, right? If you create the world's thickest castle walls, surprise, surprise, like it's really difficult to navigate human life and to be sensitive and empathetic. And if you're someone like me that's doing energy work and you're wanting to do like a psychic reading, or like if I had it on a live stream, I think a couple of weeks back, was where I
Mhm.
tried to read someone and their guides were like, mm-mm. They're like, no, like this is a bad time to do it, and they were very much closed off, and it can be, you can become that, right? You know, if you literally be the hermit and you close yourself in your castle walls and you build them so thick that eventually you almost get no, you know, helpful interactions. But we all get to choose. We've all had hermit days and years and pandemics, you know, that and when we take that right into our own hands and we say, well, actually, I want to be in those castle walls right now. Like you get to choose, you get to do that. It's just being aware of the pros and cons to all these different things. But I would never encourage someone to remove a boundary or allow erosion of the boundaries. I think always, whenever you're feeling that dread or that ick, it's just like really feel into why. Like it is not about you, it's about the other person or other thing or energy doing something to you that you're on, that feels wrong to you. And the answer is not to just dim your light and to just compromise and just go, oh yeah, sure. Like it's important for you to feel into like you have a strong boundary for a reason. Like you said, Nova, like imagine that Tuesday thing or whatever it is, like played out again and again and again in your life, because these things only expand and get worse. Imagine where that timeline takes you, that future version of you where all these boundaries have been eroded. Like
Yeah.
where, how are you going to feel? Or are you trying to achieve this world of like, you know, happy work-life balance, of relationships, of mutual respect, of working relationships where you can clearly articulate boundaries? And sure, you rub up against each other's boundaries sometimes, and sometimes it's a bit funny and sometimes it's like scary and upsetting, but it's okay. And it's better to have a boundary and for someone to rub up against it and be aware of it. And then you get to decide whether your boundary is right or wrong at any time, not them.
Yeah. Speaking of boundaries, we're at an hour.
Yeah,
Are we ready to wrap it up?
we are. Yeah. Thank you for that. Um, yeah. So anything before I close down the session?
Um, I don't think so. I think we're all right.
Fantastic. Well, thank you
This
so
was
much.
fun.
It
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, if anyone has any requests for future shadow work podcasts, let us know, and let us know your experiences of your boundaries. Perhaps you'd like to put some non-negotiables in the comments. It's lovely to hear from you. Okay, so just to close us down, I'd like to thank our guides, our higher selves, Archangel Michael, Archangel Raphael, Source, and Mother Gaia. And I'm just asking each of us to step out of the session, this podcast energy, remaining in our individual bubbles as we wish, and just clearing away that energy of the session. And yeah, I hope that this has been helpful, and look forward to seeing everyone again soon in our next podcast. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.